Four teenage girls are working the closing shift at a yogurt shop in Austin, Texas. It is a normal Friday night. Customers come and go. The city is moving toward midnight, and then, somewhere inside those final minutes, something turns horrifying. By the time firefighters put out the flames, four girls are dead inside the store. For decades, the case becomes one of the darkest and most infamous unsolved crimes in Texas. Confessions are taken, convictions are won, those convictions fall apart, and more than 30 years later, DNA changes everything. This is the chilling true story of the Austin yogurt shop murders. What makes this case so powerful is not just the brutality, it is the scale of the injustice wrapped around it. At first, it looked like a nightmare crime scene with no easy answers. Then police believed they had the answer. Then that answer collapsed, and only decades later did the case swing again, from mystery to alleged solution, leaving behind not just grief for the victims, but a second story about wrongful accusations, broken investigations, and how long truth can stay buried even when people think a case is over. The victims were Amy Ayers, who was 13, Eliza Thomas, who was 17, Jennifer Harbison, who was 17, and Jennifer's sister Sarah Harbison, who was 15. They were working at the I Can't Believe It's yogurt shop in Austin on the night of December 6, 1991. They should have gone home. Instead, shortly before midnight, a patrol officer reported a fire at the store. After the fire was extinguished, firefighters found the bodies of all four girls inside. Even after all these years, the details of the scene are hard to process. Case summaries say the girls were bound, gagged, sexually assaulted, shot, and the store was set on fire. 3 of the girls were found together, badly burned. Amy Ayers was found separately, and reporting on the case has long noted that one of the bullets that struck her did not immediately kill her, which raised the horrifying possibility that she may have still been alive when the fire began. That kind of detail is why this case stayed lodged in Austin's memory for decades. It was not just a murder. It felt like an act of total destruction. That opening alone gives the story enormous pull, but what keeps people in it is what happened next. Because after a crime that violent, most people expect the path forward to be clear: find the weapon, match the evidence, identify the killer. But this case refused to behave that way. It became one of those investigations where the need for answers was so intense that the system started pulling too hard. And when that happens, the truth can get distorted instead of revealed. That is exactly what would happen here. In the years after the murders, investigators focused on a group of local young men. By 1999, Austin police had revisited the case and interrogated Maurice Pierce, Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, and Forrest Wellborn. According to Austin police, Springsteen and Scott confessed and implicated each other. Wellborn did not confess, and Pierce's situation unfolded differently, but all 4 were arrested for capital murder. At the time, it looked to many people like the case had finally broken open. And this is where the story becomes more disturbing in a different way. Because confessions feel powerful. To the public, they sound like the end of uncertainty. But confessions are only as strong as the way they were obtained and the evidence that supports them. Springsteen was sentenced to death. Scott was sentenced to life without parole. From the outside, it looked like justice had finally arrived, but underneath that apparent victory, the case was already unstable. Over time, those convictions unraveled. Court rulings and evidentiary problems undermined the prosecutions, and later DNA testing became central. Austin police said that further testing developed an unknown YSTR DNA profile from sexual assault kit evidence, and all 4 of the original suspects were excluded as contributors to that profile. Eventually, the charges were dropped pending further investigation. Just like that, a case many people thought was solved was wide open again, except now it carried another wound: years of wrongful accusation and imprisonment. That reversal changes the emotional shape of the case. It is no longer only about 4 murdered girls. It is also about how pressure, fear, and flawed interrogation can send an investigation down the wrong road for years. In true crime, viewers often focus on the big reveal, the suspect, the twist, the courtroom outcome. But cases like this remind you that a bad answer can be almost as dangerous as no answer at all. If the wrong people are pursued, the real killer keeps moving, time keeps passing, and evidence keeps getting older. And time did pass, a lot of it. For decades, the yogurt shop murders remained one of Austin's most notorious cold cases. Families kept waiting, the city kept remembering. Books, documentaries, and case retrospectives kept returning to the same unbearable question: who did this? The names of the victims never stopped mattering, but the case kept sitting in that awful space between memory and resolution. Then, in September 2025, Austin police announced a major breakthrough. According to Austin police, DNA testing identified Robert Eugene Brashers as the suspect. Brashers was already dead by then. AP reported that he died by suicide in 1999 during a police standoff, and authorities said DNA and ballistics linked him to multiple violent crimes in the 1990s. The Texas Attorney General's office also said its cold case and missing persons unit played a critical role in the development that identified a new suspect in the quadruple homicide. After nearly 34 years, the case finally seemed to shift from unsolved mystery to named offender. That is a huge moment in any true crime case, but especially in one like this, because it does not just answer the question of who may have done it, it also reorders the meaning of everything that came before. If Brashers was the killer, then the years spent pursuing the wrong men were not just an unfortunate detour, they were years in which the actual truth stayed hidden while innocent people lost freedom, time, and their lives as they knew them. That is exactly why the case surged back into the news again in 2026. On May 12, 2026, AP reported that the city of Austin had reached a tentative $35 million settlement with 3 of the wrongly accused men and the family of Maurice Pierce, who had died in 2010. The settlement still required city council approval, but the report made clear how enormous the damage had been. This was not just about a cold case finally moving toward closure. It was about acknowledging that the justice system had compounded the original horror by building a false case against the wrong people. That is what gives this story such staying power for a channel like Caseboard Daily. It has layers. At the center are 4 girls whose lives ended in one of the most brutal crimes in Texas history. Around that is the atmosphere of a city traumatized by what happened. Around that is the investigation that appeared to solve the case but collapsed under scrutiny, and around that is the late forensic breakthrough that came too late to put the identified suspect on trial but still changed the record in a major way. If there is one thing that makes this case especially haunting, it is how completely the truth was fractured over time. First came fire and panic, then came theory, then confession, then convictions, then reversal, then DNA. Cases usually become simpler as they age, at least in hindsight. This one became more complicated. It forced people to hold 2 realities at once, a monstrous crime and a failed pursuit of justice. That is a hard thing to sit with, which is exactly why people keep returning to it. It also forces a hard question that sits underneath a lot of famous cold cases. What does closure actually mean when the suspect is dead, the victims are gone, the wrongly accused have lost years, and the public spent decades believing different versions of the story? A name from DNA can matter enormously. It can restore direction, it can correct the record, it can help families, but it cannot undo the original violence, and it cannot return the time burned up in the wrong investigation. In that sense, the yogurt shop murders are not just a true crime mystery. They are a warning about what happens when urgency outruns certainty. If there is one image that defines this case, it is not even one the public can comfortably look at. It is the contrast between a normal shop full of teenagers working a Friday shift and the horror investigators found after the fire. That contrast is what keeps the case so disturbing. Ordinary teenage life on one side, catastrophic violence on the other, and then, layered on top of that, decades of confusion over who was really responsible. Amy Ayers, Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, and Sarah Harbison were murdered at the Austin yogurt shop on December 6, 1991. Austin police announced in September 2025 that DNA identified Robert Eugene Brashers as the suspect, and in May 2026 the city reached a tentative settlement with men who had been wrongly accused. That combination is what makes this case so unforgettable. A horrifying crime, a failed path to justice, and a late forensic answer that changed the story after more than 3 decades. If you follow true crime stories that stay with you because the mystery is only part of the damage, subscribe to Caseboard Daily. Because some cases are terrifying not only for what happened that night, but for everything that happened after people thought they had the answer.